Ever had a boss so petty they dug up your dead coworker just to yell at them? Welcome to 9th century Vatican drama, where the only thing worse than a bad performance review is a posthumous trial in full papal regalia. It was the year 897 AD, and Pope Stephen VI had a problem. Not your run-of-the-mill medieval papal problem like dealing with heretics or deciding which saint to canonize. No, Stephen had a dead pope on his hands. A very dead pope, to be precise. Pope Formosus, his predecessor, had passed away a good 9 months ago, but apparently that was no reason for Stephen to let bygones be bygones. The world had seen some strange courtroom spectacles, but Stephen was about to one-up them all. He was going to put a corpse on trial. That's right, Pope Stephen VI, a man whose power was ordained by God, or at least some very ambitious cardinals, decided the best use of his papal authority was to dig up Formosus and sue him. It's hard to say exactly what his motivations were. Maybe he thought Formosus looked at him funny once at a papal council meeting. Maybe it was some deep-seated clerical jealousy. Or maybe he was just bored. Being pope was stressful after all, and medieval Europe didn't exactly have Netflix to binge-watch. But for whatever reason, Stephen was determined to get justice from a man who had been dead for almost a year. So, Formosus's body was exhumed. Now, to be clear, medieval embalming techniques weren't exactly state-of-the-art, so one can only imagine the state of poor Formosus's remains. But Stephen wasn't deterred by a bit of decomposition. He had the body dressed up in full papal regalia, because nothing says serious trial like propping up a rotting corpse in fancy clothes. The cadaver was then hauled into a courtroom, plopped on a throne, and, because dead people don't tend to talk much, a deacon was appointed to speak on Formosus's behalf. What exactly do you say when your defendant is a skeleton in a tiara? Your Honor, my client would like to plead not guilty to the charge of being dead, but Pope Stephen was on a mission. With the dead pope before him, he launched into a tirade. Formosus had been a terrible pope, Stephen claimed, guilty of perjury, violating canon law, and probably of leaving dirty dishes in the papal kitchen. Formosus's crime? Well, mostly just being pope when Stephen thought someone else should have been. Really, this trial was a high-stakes game of medieval office politics. And then, as if things weren't already bizarre enough, the corpse was found guilty. I mean, the defense attorney was probably terrified that he'd be next if he actually tried to defend the poor man. And so, Pope Stephen, his righteous anger apparently sated, ordered Formosus's 3 papal fingers, the ones used for blessings, cut off, because nothing says justice like finger amputation. Afterward, Stephen had the body reburied, but then thought, actually, let's throw him in the Tiber River for good measure. So Formosus got tossed into the river, as one does when you're finished humiliating a corpse. Now you might think, well, that's the end of that. But medieval Europe was never that simple. The whole affair, known as the Cadaver Synod, or more dramatically, the Synodus Horrenda, backfired spectacularly. The public, shockingly, wasn't too thrilled about their pope desecrating another pope's remains. People started to murmur that maybe, just maybe, Pope Stephen had gone a little off the deep end. Eventually, those murmurs turned into outright rebellion, and Pope Stephen VI found himself deposed, imprisoned, and, here's the kicker, strangled to death in prison. Formosus's body, meanwhile, was fished out of the Tiber, reburied again, and his name was posthumously cleared of all charges. You know, typical political whiplash, and thus ended one of the most insane episodes in papal history, which left everyone with 2 important lessons. 1, medieval popes had way too much free time, and 2, sometimes, even in death, it's better to keep your fingers crossed. Well, that's the story of the time a pope decided his biggest enemy was a dead guy. Because why not? If you enjoyed this little trip into Vatican reality TV and want to avoid your own posthumous performance review, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. After all, you never know when your YouTube history will be dug up and judged by the algorithm. Hit that button, or else I might just dig up some more ancient skeletons. Metaphorically, of course.